from one hospital. Oh, hello. If you look at what the starting wages are from one hospital to a next, that sometimes can be deceiving. But for a potential candidate, they may not. I think it's incumbent upon us as employers to help them understand what the entire benefit package includes, because sometimes folks are just looking at actually dollars and cents. But so again, we're competing with every other hospital for this talent. We are. We've had some challenges within Kaiser Permanente. You know, we've as far as we are still aligning ourselves with KP National. We were Group Health and then became under the KP umbrella. And so one of the challenges that we've discovered, I have in the last 3 months I've worked here, are some of our job descriptions were actually prohibiting us from hiring like new grads into as surgical techs. So while we would have surgical techs do their clinical rotations through our surgery center, we weren't able to hire them because the job description precluded that. But we've corrected that. So we've worked with our national HR department and have changed job descriptions, which I'm so grateful. So if we have really good students and we want to hire them and they like us and it's a good fit, we can now do that. So that is remarkable. As far as anesthesia techs, we don't have on-the-job training for them, so still requires anesthesia tech school or prior military. And for sterile processing, we can train on the job. I think the market, the Seattle market is expensive, and I think one of the things we hear time and again is that some of the entry-level jobs, like in sterile processing, are not competitive or not realistic for folks wanting to live close by. And so these are things that we've escalated through my chain of command and up through HR to look at. Are there opportunities to improve what the wage structure is for some of these positions? But yeah, so we have a turnover rate about 15%. So we are constantly hiring and interviewing our technicians. And if anybody, I'm thankful and grateful to be able to work with schools, because I'm a huge proponent of having techs from schools do their clinical rotations with us, because I think it's an opportunity for us to help recruit talent.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill, for sharing. Sandy, I'd love to open the line and the floor to you about what the current demands in radiology technicians are, and if there are any pain points that Ruth Page or Bill have already mentioned or not mentioned that are more severe for you than some of the ones they've talked about.
Yeah. So currently we have 45 open radiology positions. At one point last year, we had 100 positions open. And this is throughout the state, mostly Western Washington. The highest rates of job postings are really in Bellevue, Seattle, and actually Silverdale. We expanded a bit there. Challenges there, just like Bill said, are, cities, it's more expensive, so it's a little harder to recruit. And then Silverdale is kind of isolated, so you really have to move there. You're not going to commute there. So it's a little harder to commute there too. As far as radiology tech, there's a lot of different roles within radiology. Rad techs turnover quite often. They're a little easier to find than some of our high-end imaging. CT has been challenging for us, as well as mammography. And we have some positions that have been open for well over 300 days. And that's not unusual for mammography. CT is in the 200 to 300 days because the market is so competitive. Now, we have started a cross-training program within radiology that started last year, and we've successfully cross-trained some rad techs into CT and MRI, but we just don't have capacity to cross-train the volume that we need. We do, like Bill, we've updated our job descriptions, but we do not require a year of experience. We will take new grads, and we have got agreements with multiple more students or schools through the community, Bellevue, Tacoma, Pima. We've developed those partnerships so that we can build the pipeline for our employee needs.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Well, I don't see Wendy Price on the line quite yet. I think she might have been delayed, but we'll keep our eyes peeled for our Director of Workforce Development and Planning from Seattle Children's, who's going to hop on any moment here. I just want to keep the conversation going here. Sandy, Bill, and Rupage, you know, some of you have already talked about some of the strategies that you've used for overcoming the number of years needed criteria. That's a barrier to hiring some of our amazing student talent coming straight out of education, mostly through, you know, running it up the chain of the HR command to get policy changed. And so are there any other strategies that you haven't been able to employ? Or is that kind of the big one with KP, because that was the biggest barrier that you all saw?
You know, from my perspective, the other barrier is when you're doing cross-training programs, it's really hard to backfill the position or the person you're actually cross-training. So it's a financial burden for the organization. And so we do have limited capacity because we, you know, obviously need to backfill those positions. And CT can take 3 to 6 months cross-train into. MRI is typically 6 months. So it's a significant investment.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and this is Bill. It is an investment. I think for especially for the on-the-job training programs like in sterile processing. Again, I view the being able to take students, and I've worked with, one of the other things I've done for at least nursing to get new nurses through into perioperative services. We have a nursing professional development program, and they work with schools of nursing to place students, or also work to recruit new grads. So that is one of the things that I'm working with them to see to expand that. So we're not just talking about, it's not just about nursing, but we can reach out to the schools for anesthesia techs and surgical techs.
Now for pharmacy, we don't have any specific numbers of years of experience required, but certain departments may require preferred qualifications, as I mentioned. we have different areas in pharmacy. For example, specialty pharmacy or call center, they may require some sort of experience. Clinical pharmacy, for example, may require some preferred qualifications as well. In terms of what stands out in a student is be able to learn, be able to adapt to different working environments. Somebody who is able to multitask and prioritize patient care activities. Those are the things that are important for a student or for a pharmacy technician that we are looking for in KB.
Great. Thank you. Now, this has definitely already been mentioned. Some of these cross-training opportunities from your staff. Sandy, you mentioned cross-training radiology techs into CT tech or MRI tech. But then there's a big barrier with that. In that it's a tremendous investment, and you're taking people actually off the front lines to train them, and it can take months. Bill and Rutvij, are there any other cross-training opportunities from staff from other occupations that you have explored, helping them gain the technical skills and qualifications needed to fill some of these roles and responsibilities?
So regarding anesthesia techs and surgical techs are specialized jobs that do require, we require that the prospective candidate has graduated from an accredited school. So there isn't a lot of cross training. We do have, surgical techs are kind of the hands of the surgeon, and we do have RNs that can also, we call it scrubbing, and fill that role and have been cross trained, but it's not easy. That one of the things we do as part of the orientation is we do have, for new surgical techs, and is we do a shadow down in sterile processing, especially for students, so that they can see the complete life cycle of a surgical instrument from the time it's cleaned and sterilized, processed, and is used in surgery, and then goes back to sterile processing. So that is probably, it's not a cross training, it's more of a shadow experience, but there's not a lot of opportunity for those technical positions.
Makes sense.
And for pharmacy, we currently don't have any cross-training programs for other occupations. And there are bigger hurdles to go through because pharmacy is a different union compared to other professions. But we are currently in the exploratory stage for converting or developing a program for our own pharmacy assistants and having a technician training program that allows them to become pharmacy technicians. But we are in very early stages right now.
Thanks for sharing. And Sandy, I know you've kind of already shared the cross-training opportunities for radiology techs. Again, thank you so much, representatives from Kaiser. I'm going to keep the floor open for our industry voice space just a little bit longer. Wendy Price, welcome to the floor here. No worries. I definitely wanted to give you some space to speak to some of the questions that I asked of our great representatives from Kaiser Permanente. So what are the current demands in tech occupations for Seattle Children's? And are there any particular pain points that are more severe than others? And some of the things that popped up from Bill, Rootbitch, and Sandy were the number of years experience required. That was a barrier to hiring. And then they definitely also talked about some of the cross-training opportunities for other staff from other occupations, and how that can help break down some of the barriers to just having someone in that tech position.
Yeah, hi Liesl, hi everyone. My apologies for joining this important discussion late, and glad to speak just a little bit before we shift to the education partners here. But at Seattle Children's, I think I imagine I may be echoing some of the information shared by KP partners, and just that the technician positions in general are in really high demand at Children's. We definitely are feeling pain points. And in fact, we're feeling pain points in a number of areas as we see a lot of movement in and out of the organization. But so much so that we are going to be launching an internal career development series that is going to start. We're going to bring a host of career development topics to our internal workforce. But the very first session we're going to host is really focused on our technician positions and what makes those specialized skills stand out, and what's exciting about that work, what's hard about that work. Because we need to recruit new graduates from programs, but we also want to create opportunities for our internal workforce to have visibility into those roles if they want to pursue training programs and become certified in these different areas. So that's one thing we're doing. Yes, surgical techs, radiology, pharmacy are three of the significant areas that we are actually digging into career pathway mapping, so that we can, again, raise the visibility of these roles and map out what the progression, what the career trajectory looks like and what that means. So our team, in terms of workforce development and planning, those are the kinds of things we're collaborating on to just raise visibility, interest, excitement, and then create a suite of resources so people can pursue programs to get prepared and certified. And in terms of shadowing, I guess I would add that our team runs the observation program for Seattle Children. So primarily medical students who are coming to observe providers, but we're expanding that access to, and we've built an internal observation process for current employees who are interested in, just shadowing and observing different roles to get more insight into what a day in the life looks like. So in terms of shadowing, that's about the extent that we are working on at this point, is kind of building in an internal process for our observation program as well. Stop there.
So I have one last question for all of our healthcare representatives here today, and then we're going to move on to our college and apprenticeship partners. Is there a particular point in education that you want to meet students, prospective students that would be interested in being hired?
Liesl, I'll jump in just quickly. This is Wendy again, and another thing I meant to mention was just the distinct focus we have on reigniting partnerships with colleges and really establishing, and where we don't have affiliation agreements and we haven't been hosting externs, kind of bringing that back online, and not only pursuing the externship and the clinical placement side, but also what are some other ways we can partner. Can we come into the classroom and talk to students at the beginning of the program or in the middle of the program, kind of collaborating on with college faculty and such, and when the best time is to introduce, what does it mean to be a pediatric hospital, and how is that maybe different from an adult system. So definitely we're open to a lot of different connection points along that education continuum, and then certainly in that more formal space where students are needing practicum or externship or clinical hours, we certainly are opening up and wanting to host those students as well.
I echo the same thing that Wendy mentioned, and for pharmacy technicians specifically, right before their externship, or maybe about halfway through or 3/4 through their training programs, is when we would like to meet pharmacy techs or students. And also we are open to requests for speakers for high school students. So KP is open to that.
Well, thank you all so much for your time and your wisdom. I think to Wendy and Rootvige's point around reigniting the partnerships with college faculty, you know, representatives from Kaiser and Wendy, if you have someone specific that our amazing college partners could contact, you know, say they're ready, they've got some people who are ready for an externship. You know, if you could put that in the chat, that would be tremendously helpful. And I also just wanted to remind our college partners of our speakers bureau, which you can access on the HILT website. So if you have a very specific request for engaging with, you know, technicians specifically, please let the HILT network know, and we can reach out to our kind of broad swath of healthcare industry leaders that we have in the room here to see who is available to speak with your classes and your students. Thanks, everyone. We're going to shift to some questions that we have specifically geared towards our college and our apprenticeship programs. If you can give me one moment here to take the spotlight off of our industry representatives, and we're going to move on to some questions directly for education. So again, you can find these on, thank you, Jennifer, for putting the Speakers Bureau link in the chat. I appreciate it. So we're going to move on to having some questions that our healthcare partners have come up with for our education partners. So I encourage you to unmute or raise your hand if it starts to get a flurry of activity. If you have answers to any of the questions on the screen here, let's go ahead and start with, what do enrollments look like for the in-demand tech programs? Does it seem as though students are more or less interested in radiology tech, perioperative, you know, surgical anesthesia tech, as well as pharmacy tech? And Dan Ferguson, I will call on you. Oh, hi, Elizabeth.
I was rabble rousing in a meeting before, which Dan was also at, so I'll continue here.
Great.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you, and I thank you all for sharing some interesting things. And I already have some emails in mind to get out and to make some contacts. I can speak specifically to our pharmacy technician program, as we don't have radiology or surgical techs, but in terms of enrollments, we have struggled with enrollments, particularly during the pandemic. And I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anyone. But it has given us a chance to be a little bit creative in how we deliver the programs and how we do our skills labs, which might make our program better able to perhaps serve some of your incumbent workers in terms of using online classes and things like that. So I'm not sure that the interest is less. I do think that what I do hear from some students that I talk with is there is a hesitancy given the pressures that healthcare providers in general have been under for the past year. But I also see in one of our introductory classes that the pandemic has also had a positive effect in terms of increasing interest in working in healthcare. Because while there's been a lot of stresses, healthcare providers, the roles that they play, and the services that they provide, it's certainly been highlighted over the past year. So I'm not sure if that quite answers the question, but that's kind of where we are.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And you're with Edmonds Community College, correct?
I am, yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
And by the way, we have a group of pharmacy technicians that need clinical placements next quarter. I'll just throw that out there. So if I'd be interested to talk to anyone.
Wendy's waving at you.
Hi, Wendy.
Liesl, I don't have specific numbers for different colleges.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I'm really glad for you to be able to ask people like Liz, and I think Jennifer Johnson's on here as well as Terry. Because Terry, I have a hard time saying your last name, Glazewski. And so
You got it.
Oh, how about that? Anyways, but what I'm interested in kind of hearing from industry partners are some of those. I love the fact that you kind of identified the pain points, and in terms of what industry is dealing with. And, we hear about this all the time in terms of cost of living and transportation issues and housing and these kind of things. But are there, from the industry perspective, are there pain points kind of systemically that interrupt the challenges or interrupt the flow of getting students into clinicals, training, and then into jobs? And are there things that we could do differently, or we could, I love this idea of just having conversations about problem solving. And that's what we're doing here. This is awesome. So, but I think creating these opportunities for open discussion, open dialogue to do problem solving is really, really important.
It's a great question, Dan. Thank you so much. Directly from the director of the Allied Health Center for Excellence, just so everyone knows who's asking the question. So additional pain points and barriers that industry is seeing to people actually completing clinicals. That's kind of the direct question I hear from you, Dan.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Lisa, I'll jump in. This is Wendy. Yeah, thanks for the question, Dan. I will admit that, I think that Children's is in a place where we are, like I mentioned, kind of reigniting partnerships in some of these different technical areas where we haven't necessarily been, I don't think, hosting as many student placements as we could have been. And so we have there's a lot of motivation across many of our teams now to really create space and infrastructure to support. There are places where we've done that consistently historically, and PT and OT and nursing and a lot of the traditional places where we've had students, but some of these more technical, for more positions like technicians and MAs, we're really forging through opening up placements for externs and practicum and those types of experiences. So I know there are pain points, but I'll say for Children's, we're kind of just in that early stage of bringing people to us, getting our teams ready, getting affiliation agreements in place, and then bringing students to us. So that's where we're at.
This is Sandy from Kaiser. I think one of our barriers when I first started here at Kaiser was a reluctance for clinical instructors, meaning a proctor in the department itself, and really making sure that they had time to be a clinical instructor. And they also get a little bit of incentive, a pay incentive for being a student coordinator within the facility. So that has helped. and it's generated more excitement. One, because they have time to do the work. That's really important. And they get a little incentive too.
If I could ask a question, Sandy, to that point is, and to all of you, one of the things that I have heard when I've talked with people in setting up clinical partnerships is, would having some type of preceptor training be of value? Or do you already do that kind of training? Because to your point, I know, not everybody is excited about working with students. But I think sometimes when we do a little bit of training around how to work with students, that changes a little bit. And so, we've been kind of thinking about, is that something that we could provide as we build new partnerships from our perspective, that, here's what we see as the role of the preceptor, and here are some, ideas on how to do it well. Would that be?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think it's really important, because a lot of people go, well, what does that mean? What do I need to do and invest in? And they may not have been part of a training program, and it's stretching them out of their comfort zone. And then there's different personalities, of course, and some people learn different ways. And unless you have that starting point and trying to flex your style to the student, it makes it even harder.
Because I'm thinking one of the things we've learned at the college level over the past year and a half is Zoom can be a very effective teaching tool if you do it right. And I will say that all of our nursing and allied health instructors are pretty darn good at it right now, because we've got a lot of experience and we've been doing a lot of synchronous classes. And so offering something like that, kind of as part of building that clinical partnership, is probably more doable. Because we could do it in an online format, as opposed to trying to get people in one room at a time. So that's something I've had in the back of my mind.
Yeah,
One of the things.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sandy.
I was just going to say, I think you'd have more participation, and you'd be able to place more students if people felt more comfortable.
Okay. It's great, thanks.
Liz, this is Destiny. I've been hearing that from some of our partners as well. Some of our employers in the multi-employer training fund as well. And looking at any ways possible to kind of grow the capacity around preceptors, many of whom may be fatigued already during the pandemic and are stretched a little further to try to be teaching while doing their job. So anyway, I'm hearing that too. I hope that we could come up with some good solutions and trainings for folks. So I like this idea.
Thanks, Destiny. Appreciate that.
Great question, Liz. Dan, did you have something to add?
Two different comments, two different streams of thought. I hope that's okay. One, just some experience that we had over here on this side of the mountains. And that is, we had developed some training for doing interprofessional precepting, really focusing on team-based care delivery models. And what we found out that there was so few people that had been trained in just basic precepting, that we ended up having to start to provide a basic precepting model even before we went into more of the team-based interprofessional precepting. So just a kind of a heads up on that. Anyways, the other piece I just wanted to call out was this idea that Rootvidge had called out in terms of how important, and this may be an overused term, but the whole area of soft skills. And he called out specifically adaptability and ability to kind of go with the flow and just adjust kind of on the fly. And I think I really believe the colleges are working hard at trying to develop across their health workforce programs, regardless of what, or what the area of focus is those soft skills and that ability to adjust, to change when needed, to recognize that organizations change. And I'm saying this, and I'm looking at Liz, and I'm going to say, am I correct, Liz?
Correct in, I'm sorry, I was quite following you. Correct in what?
Correct in suggesting that a lot of our allied health programs across the region are really kind of highlighting and elevating those skills, regardless of what particular role or what particular position that they're being trained in. Correct?
That is absolutely correct. And I think, we certainly are here at Edmonds. We are going to be implementing a new BAS in integrated healthcare management. But I think also, as we've looked at using simulations and things like that, and developing simulation scenarios, the whole concept of interprofessionalism and interprofessional teams is always a part of what we're thinking about. Is how does this scenario in pharmacy fit with wherever else the patient may go within the facility, whether they go to the nurse practitioner, whether they go to the radiology, then they come to the pharmacy, and what roles does everybody play within that? And then on the team, if there are team debriefings, who are you bringing together? And so I know certainly in my own mind, every time we do something, we're thinking about how does it cross the programs we have here? And with, again, doing a lot of things remotely, to Dan's point about interprofessional, you can also bring in people from around the state in different professions to the same scenarios. And I just, personally, I see a lot of power behind that in terms of skills development.
So on that note, thanks, Liz, and thanks for being willing to take my my pointer there. And if our industry partners find that to be useful, we really want to hear about that. And I'm assuming that they do. And now I'm looking at Wendy.
Yes, that's, people skills, right? Communication and people skills are really important, and the flexibility. So giving them those tools is a great start in any profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Would just echo that. Definitely is still hugely important. And Liz, the interdepartmental, interprofessional approach. That's how all of our clinical teams function together. Is they need to be working across disciplines as a team, really kind of no matter what their role. So I love hearing that that's the approach you take in all of the program design you do.
I'd be curious to hear from Jennifer and Terry around any pointed questions that they have for our healthcare partners, or if you could just share, what college you're representing, and then maybe what enrollments are looking like in your tech programs. Are students more or less interested from your perspective in your programs?
Hi, I'm Terry Glazewski from Edmonds, and I work very closely with Liz Patterson. So I would say that at this point, our enrollments are really good for the CNA program and for phlebotomy and EKG. It seems that our pharmacy tech program, as Liz said, has been low enrolled for the last few quarters. I'm not sure what's going to happen for fall. We obviously have had problems with clinical, but we were able to flip to simulation for a lot of our clinical time, which was a great help. I have been working to get clinical sites reestablished and new clinical sites, and the partners have been eager to have the students back, which I was glad about. And I gave Liz a little list, but I can't remember what else I put on there.
Well, I also see, I guess we did have Jennifer on with us from Highline, but do we have UW in the room as well?
I'm here. This is Jennifer.
You
But
are.
I see some other schools are on here too, like Roseanne's from Green River, and it seemed
Thank
like Pam was from Lake Washington was on here too. We don't have too many of these specific ones that are called out in this conversation. Although we have respiratory therapists, but you know, nursing, respiratory therapy always full. Nursing assistant full. Medical assistant, interestingly, some has been recently having soft enrollment, and I'm not sure what's behind that, but not for this summer or for this fall, but in the last year. So.
What about Roseanne, Green River? Any of our other education partners want to chime in here?
For us, it's the same as what Jennifer said. We don't have any of the tech programs that are listed here, but we have OTA, PTA, and then the nursing programs are full. We definitely have fewer applicants for some of the OTA, PTA programs than we've had in the past, but with the cohort model, we'll still be able to have full classes, although I've only been at the college 1 year, but like looking at retention this year for like the second year students is a bit lower than usual. I think maybe uncertainty around the economy. So fewer applicants, slightly poorer retention in the programs that we have. But again, we don't have these in-demand tech programs.
Okay.
It would be great to hear for Renton Tech or Lake Washington, where they have lots of these. But I don't know that anybody from either of those is here anymore.
This is Destiny. I'm on the HEAT project for RTC for their search techs, and so just wanted to say I was especially happy to hear that that Kaiser Permanente has been able to make those adjustments, the labor management work and the national work so that there's a direct pathway internally. Folks won't have to leave for 2 years and then get the experience and come back. So that those types of things can be game changers and things that we can promote within the organization. We just I guess I just want to say that we have surprisingly few of our members will naturally come in and say, I want to take on that tech role. So many folks are focused on patient care or on nursing or on some other path. And so I feel like there's work to do at the awareness level. And I think what we've been thinking about and talking about over the past year is recognizing those roles where the need is there, but the interest isn't coming in on the front side. So, and what types of awareness, how do we get peer-to-peer success stories? How do we get that emotional change where someone says, I need to check out a different career than I maybe had in mind, or to look at folks sort of disaffected in the nursing pathway, not getting into the programs they want to, maybe consider a career shift as well. So trying to find the right target folks where there's lower enrollment and trying to really do more to direct folks into the pathways where the jobs are. Ultimately, they do want the jobs. They just don't know necessarily about the path if it's not as well publicized. So,
Destiny makes a really important point, and it follows the conversation some of us were in earlier about behavioral health pathways, which is that just this like really targeted marketing from each profession that the schools we don't have the capacity to do that much marketing per individual program kind of thing. But if the industry partners I could imagine a really cool video that they make saying, here's something, like the Army always did. Those were really cool, ads. And if industry could pull out some of the more interesting fields that, for example, kids don't look at or incumbent workers might not be considering because they think, oh, I want to do direct patient care. Well, there's plenty of direct patient care with imaging probably.
Yeah, I think I like what Destiny brings up as well, because I think I think it was, someone mentioned getting connected with the high schools. And I will admit, I come from an imaging background. I'm a radiology ultrasound person. And, so I'm all in favor of getting more folks into those fields, but they are less known. It's sort of, and nursing certainly in the media and certainly through the pandemic, has, and rightly so, gotten a lot of attention and a lot of press. And I think about the poor respiratory techs who, probably spent as much time or even more with all the ventilated patients, and were kind of those hidden heroes. So, perhaps some type of working with industry partners and maybe with our college relations to do some type of a video that, we could share across the colleges for doing some recruitment. We do work with the Edmonds School District. They have a health professions class, which mirrors our introduction to healthcare class. And we would love to be able to get you connected to talk about, all of the opportunities and pathways in healthcare. So we can certainly help facilitate that. I really think allied health is a vague term, and nobody really kind of knows who we are.
This is Bill. I'm familiar back. I used to work at Seattle Children's, and one of the highlights of the summer, I think it was June, July, we would have nurse camp. So host nurse camp, and these were high school students considering, nursing as a career. And it was a big to do. I mean, all the educators were nursing educators were involved in this. And I wonder, is there anything similar for the other non-nursing healthcare workers and professionals? Do we have any kind of, you said allied health, is there any outreach to high school students and exposure to some of these other roles? I'm just wondering if that's not the population that we should be targeting.
Yeah, this is Sandy. When I worked at a previous organization in Olympia, we worked with, and I don't know that KC does, so shame on us, we haven't gotten there yet. But there was a program called New Market, and it was a big to-do, and we had high school students. They're usually not freshmen, but the second year in high school. They come through and shadow in different modalities, and they went to respiratory therapy, they went to radiology, all the different departments within radiology. Now, that takes a lot of effort. Obviously, it takes a lot of time and a team, and that organization had a team to work with the local high school students, and we did get a lot of students that went through that program that went into allied health, but I don't know that that's widespread.
Dan, I'll put the laser back on you. Would this be something the Western Washington Area Health Education Center I know it's way up at Whatcom, but I know the Eastern Washington Area Health Education Center was doing some work with high schools and some sort of boot camps. Is that a connection that we should kind of triangulate with industry colleges to look at some sort of tech camps?
Yeah, there's actually been different organizations like the Area Health Education Centers. Eastern Washington, AHEC is well known for their scrubs camps.
Yeah.
The Association of Washington Business actually historically supported some health workforce development camps. Moses Lake or Big Bend Community College would host those. The challenge with those, anything that you do with high school students and this may not be politically correct the way I'm going to say this, but anything that you do like a one and done, let's bring 1,000 kids into a high school and give them a kind of a shot at understanding healthcare careers. There's very little research to support the efficacy of that kind of event. The more long-term shadowing, mentoring, giving them more intense exposure is much more likely to produce a workforce. But Liz, to your question, it is a real good idea to reach out to those partners like the skill centers, like New Market is a skill center in Olympia. And so it's really operated out of the Career and Technical Education Office of OSPI. And so there's a number of skill centers around the state that specifically have those kinds of programs. Skagit Valley has those. They're scattered across the whole state.
Yeah,
So,
we
yeah.
have one Snow Isle Skill Center, and they also have a health professions class.
Right.
And we've articulated some of our programs to that health professions class. So
yes, it is a good idea to reach out to them and to really to kind of this other broader conversation, how, you know, historically it's all about nurses and physicians, right? And
I was trying to say that, but
but it's I mean, when you look at the sheer numbers, it's true, nurses and physicians, but it's also true that we need a lot of other folks, and we need counselors in the high schools to recognize and to encourage students to think broadly about opportunities. So yes, Wendy.
Yeah, this is just a great conversation. I'll just share, Bill, I'm so glad that you brought up nurse camp, because Children's is still continuing nurse camp. It's been a long number of years that we've done nurse camp in the summer for rising seniors. And what we have been recognizing is that, you know, nurse camp to registered nurse is a long trajectory, right? When you're not quite graduated from high school. So, you know, our touch point with those campers is we need to actively be keeping in touch, just maintaining that relationship somehow. So that's something that we're reflecting on. But what we've also done in our RN residency program is that we have identified some of our specific initiatives in our application to our RN residency program. So if people have had a relationship with Seattle Children's, they can indicate if they've been a volunteer here, if they've been a nurse camper, if they were part of our diverse senior practicum program, they were a Liz Thomas Legacy Scholarship applicant or recipient. And so we're taking that and we're collecting that information in the RN residency application process. So that's just one very long-term, slightly dotted line we've connected from the high school experience to becoming a nurse at Children's. But it is hard, to stay in touch and to cultivate a successful conversion from those early experiences into a higher. But we could also look at something similar in the tech space. I mean, I think I put in the chat that we're also talking about how do we make that more interdisciplinary, that camping experience. Maybe we bring in some other disciplines into that week-long experience so they get just greater exposure to different roles. So a few thoughts on that.
And if I could chime in from a HILT perspective here, I mean, Seattle Children's was integral in this year's Sound Careers and Healthcare event, which HILT sponsored and helped facilitate, and many of our healthcare industry partners volunteered staff from a variety of occupations to speak to students. You know, it was a whole week-long virtual event. And this is something that the HILT Talent Pipeline Committee has expressed a desire to replicate on an annual basis, and essentially has since 2019, although in 2020, of course, we had to kind of pump the brakes and pivot. And we saw, a great turnout from our virtual event this past April. And one of the days was having particular occupations. We had surgeons, we had nurses, we had people from marketing and HR, a whole variety of healthcare occupations represented, talking one-on-one with students. And I think that, thinking about, I know we have Consuelo Davis on the line, who has a brand new role at the Washington Alliance for Better Schools to help stand up this student experience package, of which an annual event that HILT sponsors, hosts, is engaged in, is integral to developing, help create this event every single year, and just, again, figuring out how to make that more sustainable. So what I'm hearing is that our healthcare partners want to be able to either be present or send their own staff to meet the students, high school, post-secondary, that are just exploring healthcare occupations for our event that will be in 2022. And we absolutely partnered with the Area Health Education Center of Western Washington. Corey and her team brought it. They are incredible partners. They were integral, not just to planning it, but to executing it. They've helped us with data, figuring out who the students were that were there and where they came from. We invited students from all over Western Washington. They are amazing partners, and we definitely used their Scrubs Camps model. Again, tweaked it a little bit, made it virtual. So everything you're hearing is kind of music to my ears. It's probably music to Consuelo's ears as well. So we'll definitely be in touch with regards to the event in 2022. Dan, do I see a hand?
You do.
Yeah.
And sorry, you also see a cat.
Yeah, that was adorable.
This is Emmy, everyone.
Hi, Emmy.
So, Lisa, your question number 2 or 3 had to do with diversity strategies or efforts. Yes, race equity efforts. So I think this is a real important question, and I didn't want to lose this as an opportunity just to elevate the importance of, as you said in that second question, what can industry do to collaborate on this outcome? So I think essentially from my perspective is to say they're interested in collaborating and to make sure that our efforts are aligned in regards to increasing the diversity of the health workforce. So, and to just, we need to figure out a messaging campaign that stresses how important this is, that our health workforce development programs across all of our training programs, particularly in our community technical colleges, but other higher education programs as well, we're really interested in partnering with industry to align our efforts and to share messaging around this. And so whatever we can do to do that is going to be absolutely crucial. So I think if students hear that this is a collective effort, they're going to start paying attention rather than just, as Liz kind of mentioned, kind of individually siloed kind of communicating from one program. Anyways, I'm preaching now.
Great.
And that's getting a lot of national attention to figure out how to do that, just to FYI.
Lisa, I was just going to comment that I think, Dan, I think that this group, the HILT, has actually done a fairly good job of coming together and having an industry voice. I mean, I think that's why we come, that's why we convene here, and I do appreciate that. I think that's been effective. So I feel like there's commitment to continue to do that from the industry side. At least I can speak for us, and yeah, I feel like that has greater reach and maybe wider power.
Yeah, I agree, Wendy. And so to me, there's a lot of kind of talking about why it's so important, but then kind of what is the next operational step or actionable step in that kind of strategy, I guess would be the next thing.
Yeah, let me tell you what my instinct was. My instinct was to tell all of the college partners and people that are in connection with students that all about the things that we're investing in and why it's great to come work at Children's, because we need people, but that's not necessarily the collective effort commitment that I think we're maybe the spirit within which we're working here. So I think it would be interesting to really brainstorm that.
This is Lindsay, part of the HILT convening team, and I've been sort of quietly, just listening and observing. I think this is a fantastic conversation. It always is. So thank you to all of our partners. I think the question you raised, Dan, is interesting. And Wendy, to your point, that HILT has been really, especially the captain's team and Children's Hospital as part of that captain's team, has been really going down this question of race equity and what does it take for healthcare organizations to become anti-racist organizations and continue on that continuum. Of course, that requires a lot of focus on hiring practices. And so I'm curious, you say practical next steps, Dan, and I work nationally on healthcare partnerships. I would love to see this region and the HILT demonstrate something here. And I'm wondering if there's something related to how are healthcare organizations changing their hiring practices, their skills-based hiring practices, their interview and job descriptions with an angle and a purposeful goal of race equity, because I know that that's part of the strategy that individual healthcare organizations are designing and implementing. So how can HILT kind of lift some of those practices up and take them to scale? How can we also then deliberately connect that to the community college programs that have students that are going in or need to be going in? Is there some sort of demonstration that can happen around the changed hiring practices focused on race equity and the colleges and students and really getting them in to, try out, test out, do what's best for especially our students of color. So I'm throwing that out there because as a HILT convener, I think I see some of those pieces potentially aligning.
Yeah, and I really appreciate, Lindsay, you just coming on board and and just asking that question and adding the perspective of the facilitator convener. I think that this question of how do you align effort and move forward is ever present in multiple circles right now. And I guess, and I appreciate the fact that HILT has been a leader and has been fairly outspoken with their efforts to really move forward with this. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about how do we cooperate? How do we align? How do we message together? To me, it just is a lot of work. Thanks for asking the good questions. Lindsay, you're on mute.
There we go. Many hands make light work, right? So to Wendy's point too, just the power of the network. And yes, we need to figure out, what that means and how it gets played out. But now's the time, right?
Do you mind if I just bring up an example of where we're taking this conversation at the national level? So,
Please.
Okay, so I'm on the planning committee for the National Center for Interprofessional Practice and Education, which is based at the University of Minnesota. And they put on a national conference every year focused on interprofessional education and clinical practice. And this year we're going to be focusing on who makes up the health workforce, and to be thinking of, because most of the conversations when it comes to like team-based care focuses really on pharmacy, nursing, and physicians. And they don't recognize the fact that when you pay attention and you look at the demographics of who actually makes up the entry-level professions like nursing assistants, medical assistants, LPNs, the tech positions, it's really persons of color. And so and Bianca Frogner from the Center for Health Workforce Studies has done a lot of work in looking at this at the national level. And we're going to be looking at and developing a session at that meeting, which is either going to be in September or October, at kind of efforts of the community colleges and efforts of industry partners to grow that workforce. And first of all, just raising awareness around who actually makes up the workforce, kind of the economic impact of that. And then how do we, from a kind of organizational culture and team-based culture, how do we value everyone in the healthcare team so that we want them to continue the career pathways and to grow? Anyways, that's just one example of what we're doing to address this.
Well, and I just throw in, and then unfortunately I'm going to have to leave. From our standpoint, Edmonds, we've always focused on entry-level programs, and from the beginning we focused on open entry, and created, rather than sort of the standard English math prerequisites, we created some core classes that were specifically related to healthcare. Introduction to healthcare, which is communication, what's going on in the industry, law and ethics, basic medical terminology, basic AMP. And so I think we've kind of naturally attracted a more diverse student population because the certificates are short, they can do them in steps. But as we've grown and we've grown our pathways, we've also grown our supports. And, when I think about one of the questions that was on is, incumbent workers from other areas into healthcare direct or patient care positions or tech positions, is it's not only getting the interest, but how do you support those academic needs? And that's perhaps where the colleges can show some best practices with, our support classes, with tutoring. We've looked at redesigning the math pathways, all to get them to the levels that they need for the higher level technical positions. I mean, radiology, you can't be a slouch in physics in radiology. And, pharmacy tech, even, as you grow in a pharmacy tech, just the pharmacology alone is complex. And so I think how you build up those skills and somebody had mentioned retention, to retain people, not just in a single profession, but to grow them. And I don't have an answer here, but I'm wondering how we can better collaborate with industry on that, and create the pathways or create those supports, not just at the college level, but perhaps on the job, that'll move them along the pathway and keep that diversity coming.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And you kind of transitioned beautifully. I know we're over time, but I have 4 key takeaways which echo kind of what Liz is talking about, needing that partnership and aligning with industry on some of these kind of just informative spaces. One thing is that preceptor training is useful. That marketing certain occupations, specifically the ones we've been mentioning today and beyond in the allied health professions, education doesn't necessarily have the resources or capacity to do that alone, and that industry's not just input but investment is needed. and that industry is ready and willing to kind of help with that, because they also want to help market for these allied health occupations. The student experience package came up, right? The annual event, as well as the mentorship program that is part of the developing a student experience package are crucial, and that allied health and specifically these technician roles need to be central to the conversation, since we always highlight and elevate nurses and doctors. And finally, thanks, Lindsay, for bringing us back to, and Dan, for bringing us back to making sure we're integrating racial equity, and how we do that here as a network. How are we changing what we do have control over? HR hiring practices, skill sets, job descriptions, with the goal of a racial equity lens to help attract and hire those members of the community that reflect the patients that are actually very interested and very qualified for these allied health occupations. How can HILT elevate and scale connecting K through 12 and community technical colleges with industry's desire to make sure we have a diverse workforce, with the goal, again, of being more inclusive, more diverse, and essentially just having a foundation of anti-racism already embedded in our practices. So I'm going to send out the notes with those 4 key takeaways. I really hope people have had the opportunity to share emails in the chat, learn something. Please feel free to reach out to your HILT co-convening team if you have any questions, concerns, or desire to follow up with someone that you heard speak today. One final shout out to our great healthcare industry representatives who we called out and highlighted, pinpointed at the beginning. And then thank you again, education partners, for stepping up, asking really great, honest questions and challenging one another. So with that, hope everyone has a really great afternoon, and we'll be seeing you hopefully at the HILT Summer Quarterly Meeting. That will be August 26th from 9 to 11. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liesl. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.